The organizer is present. Please stand by. Your conference will begin shortly.
Welcome to a special webinar presented by WealthBuyer Incorporated, The Power of the S-Curve. Hi everybody, I'm Rick on behalf of Manny Backus and WealthBuyer. We're here in our webinar broadcast suite outside New York City. Today our special guest is Bob Joyner. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Rick. How you doing?
Bob is here today to share with us how to use the power of the S-curve in day trading. Our webinar will last just about 30 minutes, about half an hour, and we hopefully will have time for some questions for Bob at the end of the webinar. So if you have some questions, type them into the question box on your screen, and I'll relay them on to Bob. But first, little background information about Bob. Last year, he placed about 1,200 trades in the stock market. How about the first quarter of this year, Bob? How's that going?
I'm trying to slow down just a little bit, Rick.
Okay,
I'm tired of paying all those fees. Yeah.
He studies about 25 stocks for every trade he makes. Actually, he's published 2 books on stock trading, one of which we'll make available to you free at the end of the webinar today for everyone who signs up for a trial subscription to the First Hour Trading System. If you'd like to get in touch with Bob, here's his email address, bob@gapdownprofits.com. Now, my name is Rick, and I'm just here to try to make sure that the webinar runs smoothly. I pass your questions on to Bob so he can answer them, and I'll also be around at the end of the webinar to offer you a special trial subscription to the First Hour Trading System from WealthBuyer, so be sure to stick around for that. I don't know how many of you have attended a webinar before, but let me give you some ground rules. Here's how it works. First of all, you'll be hearing us on the telephone, but we can't hear you. The software shuts off your end of the phone, so it's okay if the dog is barking or the baby is crying. we can't hear that. But that also means if you want to ask Bob any questions, you have to type them into your PC. If you're not a subscriber to the First Hour Trading System from WealthBuyer, be sure to stick around for a free offer at the end of this webinar. It includes a free copy of Bob's book, The Power of the S-Curve. As we wait for the stragglers to appear for our webinar this evening, let's take a couple seconds to ask a poll question. And this is so Bob can tailor his presentation for you. I'm going to present a poll question on the screen and just click your response. How long have you been trading in the stock market? And the choices are less than 6 months, between 1 and 5 years, between 5 and 10 years, or greater than 10 years. Just click your response. About half of you have answered now. I'm going to close the poll question, and here are the results. 25% of you have been trading between 1 and 5 years, 21% less than 6 months, 15% between 5 and 10 years, and 11% for greater than 10 years. Are those the results that you had expected, Bob?
It's very interesting. It really is. Glad that we have so many new people on the call.
So here's a follow-up question for that. How long have you been day trading? The first question was trading in general. This follow-up poll question, how long have you been day trading? About half of you have voted. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds. Okay, here are the responses. 42% of you have been trading for less than 6 months. I guess that makes a lot of sense. And then the second most prevalent response was 1 to 5 years, with 38%. Okay, let's get started with our presentation this evening. Bob, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Rick. Thanks, everybody, for giving your answers, too. That's very interesting. And we'll have some other questions, I believe, later as well. I developed the S-curve idea as a real simple way, Rick, to kind of view charts. What I do to kind of back up a little bit is I use technical analysis. I use indicators to tell me exactly when to buy and when to sell stocks, or if I'm shorting, when to short them and when to cover them. And I developed the S-curve because this pattern exists, and we're going to show you a chart in just a second. But that pattern exists repeatedly in the market, and once you catch that visual of what's happening with the stocks, it makes life so much easier. It kind of tells you pretty much once you understand it, and once you understand some basic technical indicators, it makes life a lot easier when you're trading stocks.
Bob, what do you think are the biggest mistakes made by day traders in your experience? What are the biggest mistakes made?
Well, it's easy for me to speak from experience because, Rick, when I first started trading, I learned, as probably many of our listeners did, I learned by the seat of my pants. I sat myself in front of a computer and I tried to figure out how to do this thing. Not an easy way to go. As I say many times, the stock market is an expensive place to get an education, very expensive. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call can identify with that. The great thing is that you got to stay with it. The great thing is if you have the capital and you can learn and you can stay with it, then you can learn how to make a lot of money in this market and any kind of market. But to answer your questions, Rick, the number one thing I think that people have a problem with, and that's not having any kind of a trading system at all. The majority of people, when they're first starting out, and a lot of our listeners have been trading for less than 6 months, is you're walking around the internet and you're walking around the stock market trying to pick up lessons here and there, and you're trying to do one thing or another. And in the process, you're probably losing your shirt because you don't have a system that you can hone in and identify and really articulate it to other people, tell people exactly what you're doing and what you're not doing, and then do that repeatedly in the market over and over again. So that's the number one thing, I think, is just not having a system that's proven itself to work time and time again if you just repeat the same thing over and over again. The second biggest thing, I think, and it's a myth out there, Rick, I believe that people believe that traders have to be these solopreneurs who are sitting at their computer all by themselves, not talking to anybody else, going it alone, the Lone Ranger mentality. And it's a frustrating business to do by yourself. A lot of people's spouses or significant others do not understand what the heck you're doing. They don't understand the attraction. They probably would rather you quit because it's frustrating at times. And that's a big mistake, is to feel like you got to be out there all by yourself. A great thing nowadays that is possible is more social networking, where you can actually get with like-minded people and trade together. And the old expression that two heads are better than one definitely applies to trading. The third thing I'd mention real quick, Rick, is that people feel like they got to hit the home run every time. That if they're not making some huge percentages, that it's not worth trying. So the ability to take small profits when they come to you, rather than letting those profits turn into losses. I'm sure a lot of us have done that before too. You keep holding on, hoping that it's going to all work out, and then you keep watching as your plus signs turn into negatives, and that's a pretty frustrating thing to do too. And I think part of that is the old emotion of greed and fear, that people just they're not willing to take those small profits. And Rick, to define a small profit it is based on the leverage of capital that you have to trade. What I mean by that is, for example, in Manny's service, if you get a 1% return on $25,000 of equity, then you're making a pretty nice play. If you have less money, then even a 3 to 4% gain in one day is a home run in my book. If you can repeat that over and over again, then you'll be pretty wealthy. I think I actually figured it out in the book that the callers were able to get tonight for free. I think it's toward the end of the book. If you were to earn just 6% per week, I think is the number I use, Rick, and you started just with $6,000 in the beginning, after a year you would have over 100,000, and that's huge.
I'll take that. Thank you, Bob.
And most people would, but the problem is that most people don't. They want to go for the home run. They don't get out of their losses quickly and move on.
And that's the end of the first part of our webinar, The Power of the S-Curve, with Bob Joyner, presented by WealthPire. Please visit firsthourtrading.com/details.html to learn more about this evening's special offer for the First Hour Trading System.